Hello everybody and welcome to another Q&A. We have some great questions.
Let's go.
Alright, let's just jump right into it.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Yes! Box me around the ears for being a smart ass.
Alright, number one question.
Oh, did I just pause that? No, we're good. Carry on. The islands are very popular, a great destination indeed, but have you thought about cruising the American coast, as in America, not United States? Before going north/east, there are a lot of underrated places along Belize.
I definitely think we have. Initially when we first started sailing, we were like, we're gonna go everywhere! And the Caribbean Sea was definitely on our circuit. Since we've been here, we, have embraced the slow pace of life, obviously. But it's still definitely on our list, and it's somewhere that we considered going if we couldn't move anywhere this hurricane season or next year or anything. We've definitely considered going out.
It's very different from here, from what I gather. There's lots to do, lots of inland exploring to be done, huge bodies of land, which is vastly different from here. I think the problem we've had is that we set out with these lofty goals, and then the boat didn't pan out the way we hoped, and we were doing basically a refit on the run for the last 2 years. And up and down this stretch of water, it's pretty routine trade wind sailing, and it's like a good place to go. And we've been reluctant to disappear any further afield until we're certain, because you don't want to let go of one branch until you have a grasp on the other, which is, I think, in error, because you can totally get parts and work done in Panama as much as you can in Grenada or in St. Martin, or if not more so, I would say. Yes, to answer your question, we very much want to go along that coastline, and we totally plan to at some stage.
Next question.
Next question. Whoa.
Okay, Tom Downey's asks, would you ever do a catamaran? Which is a great question. I think that's fantastic.
It's a loaded question.
It is, I know. Okay, so...
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, but...
You go first.
Okay. I personally don't particularly like the motion of a catamaran when it's sailing. I don't like how it walks, and I get just as seasick, if not maybe a little more seasick, in a catamaran than I do in a monohull. So for me, sailing-wise, it doesn't really appeal to me. I don't think that they look as beautiful. Perhaps they look a little squarer, and
Some do.
Some definitely do. I think the older catamarans, which have beautiful lines to them, I think that they're a lot prettier. If I'm going to be an anchor in a catamaran on a boat, then hell yeah, a catamaran is fantastic. And so those would be my caveats, I guess. If I weren't going too far in sailing, then I would definitely settle for a catamaran.
We've perhaps in the past come across as pretty dogmatic, purist type sailors, where unless you have a full keel and a skeg hung rudder, you shouldn't put to sea at all, which is not
true.
How we feel at all. I think boats, like aeroplanes, are horses for courses. What is your mission profile? And the best boat is the one that's built as closely to that mission profile's constraints as possible. That is what makes a good boat. And as far as what we've done thus far, the Cat of any kind really is better suited to that mission profile than this boat, and pretty much most blue water boats that I know of.
Ginning around the islands doesn't require a really hefty, seaworthy boat.
Exactly. You're day hopping more often than not, you're beam reaching more often than not, or downwind, and you have lots of time to wait.
You might occasionally have an overnight sail.
Exactly. Unless you're charging around like a headless chicken, you will spend most of your time at anchor enjoying the bay that you just spent a couple of days getting to. And for that, a Cat it's a floating condo, some of them, so why would you not have that? So it's horses for courses. Would we do a Cat? Yes, if all we wanted to do was a mid-latitude circuit. I don't know, but then it's hard. See, this is why it's a loaded question. Would I do a Cat? Yes. If one fell in my lap, I wouldn't turn my nose up at it and walk away.
No.
If there was a bargain on a really good one, yes. I think they're really fun to sail, really fast, really exciting, really simple. Yeah, so I would have one.
But just for a mid-latitude circuit, is that correct?
Yeah, but now as I say that, I'm like, but maybe there's another mono that I might choose instead of a Cat. So, loaded question. Would I do a Cat? Yes.
Would it be your first preference? No.
Would it be my first preference? No. Yeah.
Okay. Paul SJ asked, allow me a question. How do the two foresails on your cutter rig work together and enhance the performance compared to the Genoa alone? I'm going to let him do this one. I mean, I'm going to let him.
Oh, well, by all means. I think this question is best answered in two parts. One of which I think it's I'm going to refer out for further reading for you because I'll be here all day. And the second part I can comment on with some confidence. First part, aerodynamically, it is not as visceral as you would think. How do you put it? All right, I'm going to refer it straight out. So there's a man named Avril Gentry. Let's go with Gentry. And he's an aerospace engineer, worked for McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, and he's also quite an avid racing sailor. And he did a lot of work on aerodynamics of sailing and wrote a series of articles for Cruising World or Sailing Magazine, various magazines. And they're all on his website for free. So I'll put the links below for his website. And if you're interested in the aerodynamic effects of a double-headed rig, he's got a brilliant article on it, which should clear up a lot. In a nutshell, it helps power up. It helps power up the main, and it provides a certain benefit on certain points of sail at a certain trim. And what's called the double-headed setup is essentially you furl your genoa to the maximum camber point of the staysail, and that allows optimal flow for the double-headed rig. Generally speaking, his findings, to my recollection, were essentially that other than those things, there's no aerodynamic benefit. Where I think the double-headed rig, the cutter rig, really comes into its own, and why all the greats seem to favour them for blue water cruising, you know, like Lynn and Larry Party wrote a really great article that I will also link below on why they think a cutter rig is ideal. I know my buddy John uses a cutter rig to no end. He's obsessed with them for the same reasons that I'm about to describe now. When you have your staysail up, you bring your center of effort rearwards and down, and you can now shorten your genoa for the same sort of head sail effect. What that facilitates is much lower sheet loads, and so now instead of one massive sail that's quite hard, quite a handful, you've got two smaller sails that provide the same drive in two smaller portions. Much easier to maneuver, much easier to put away. You're halfway to reefing down to the next smaller sail. You're sailing along, you're at a full canvas. Alright, you've got your staysail, your head sail, your genoa, and your main. Right, the wind freshens to 25 knots. Let's put a reef in the main, let's furl in a quarter of the jib. So we've now, that's actually Millie's best point of sail. She's never happier than with that setup because the main is like, you don't have weather helm to contend with because the main's nice and flat. And you're dumping any squalls and any gusts, the boat will heel over. But when you've got a double-headed rig, it heels over, and because you've got these sort of two small sails, it's not as violent. Instead of heeling over, she charges forward and dumps off any excess lift. You just have to take my word for that. You have to feel it. And the last effect that is more subtle, but really apparent when you're doing it for a long time on these long tacks, is the motion of the boat. Because you're bringing the center of effort down and rearwards versus the center of lateral resistance. If you've got your genoa only and your main, a full main, it's sort of the center of effort's up here, lateral resistance here, and sort of from a forward backwards motion, the boat sort of does this. And so you're sort of rounding up, and then it gets that hobby horse motion as the boat gets knocked by the waves. When you bring the center of effort down, the oscillation changes, and it's a shorter period oscillation, and so the boat doesn't, it goes from this to this, and you really notice the boat not getting pushed around so much. The drive is more consistent. The way the way I describe it is like putting the boat in low range if you're a four-wheel drive. You don't have like that off the line in 60 seconds, but she's in low range. She just keeps trucking. She just keeps on trucking. That is why the cutter rig is the bestest.
What he said. All right, Michael Wallace asked, do you use running backstays when sailing with the staysail?
The answer is no, you don't have running backstays on a Tayana 42. I think it's to do with the shape of the hull and where the main sits. How do we get around that is what's called a cowcatcher. It's essentially diamond stays slung over a ring, and I've explained this in another video, so I'll just link to that. In a nutshell, what it does is it offloads the loads, redistributes the loads from the baby stay, which is what the staysail is hanged onto, and sort of transfers them through the diamond stays to the backstay. PPK Films, thank you for showing the jib in answer to my question.
Ah, so he must have asked how do we tack? How do we jibe?
Does the Genoa get stuck on the baby stay when we are jibing? And we answered that last week in one of our episodes. Follow-up question to that, is there not too much chafing on the baby stay, or of the sail on the baby stay, rather?
Well, yes, there is. I mean, you can see that there is.
There's definitely chafing. It does run across the baby stay, but the jib is, 8 years old?
Yeah, something like that, maybe a little older.
Maybe a little older, and it has no visible signs of chafing, and you just don't tack, like you're not.
We're cruisers. We go on one tack for days or a day, and then as soon as we're going into port, we
especially trade wind sailing, you will literally be on one tack. I think we were on one tack 90% of the way from Grenada to St Martin.
It's not an issue for us.
Yeah, almost entire, right up into the point. No, not even. We did it in one tack because we just went just cut the cord. We came up here and the wind veered and we did it all in one tack, and then we got to there and we just rounded up into the wind, turned the motor on, and we were done.
So no, definitely not an issue.
Not really an issue, not at all. Ted, hi mate, this may have been an editing thing, but towards the end of the video you weren't using a winch to retract your furler, were you? What I'm doing is just kind of furling in the sail, using the furling of the sail to trim the jib flatter and flatter and flatter. Yes, I very much was, and I'll cop that, sorry, not cop that, I will debate that. I am not a believer. I know that charter boats and small boats and everyone sort of wants you to furl in your head sail by hand and round up into the wind, but I just don't. I think that if you can, you should. But I don't think there's a rap on the knuckles deserved for doing that. In fact, I think you need to be able to get your head sail in under pressure. If you're charging along at 6 knots, 7 knots, and you're set up for 22 knots, and a squall comes through and it goes to 40, and the seas are 6-7 foot seas or whatever they might be, which is not abnormal. It's just not practical to round the boat up into the weather, let it luff and carry on and become a wrecking ball, and then start reeling it in. It's by hand, actually. See, I've gone to the wind. By hand. 1, not possible for a sail that size. 2, dangerous. 3, just impractical for, rounding up it. Like, it's just, you need to be able to manage the pressure on the sail as you're furling it in. So you dump a little bit, trim it with the furling from the front instead of the clew, dump a little bit more, trim it, dump a little bit more, trim it, until you either got rid of it or got it to be small enough where you can just heave it in, or it's reefed to an appropriate point for the new wind. That's not just me making that stuff up either. There's people who know much more than I who echo that sentiment.
Because the way you actually furl your head sail offshore, especially in breezy conditions, is you just ease the sheet enough to release pressure on the sail, and then you furl it in with a furling line, a strong furling line like a Dyneema furling line, led to a winch. When it's a 20 knot breeze and a 12-foot sea, the idea that you're just going to bring your boat into the wind and flog the heck out of your head sail while you're trying to furl it, you do that a few times and you realize that's ridiculous.
So yes, you're absolutely right. I did use the winch. I always use the winch. I am very careful about loading up the sails. I am always watching. Whoever is furling in the head sail is also manning the sheet, or is in direct communication with who is someone on the sheet, and it's sort of ease and collect, ease and collect.
Adam loves a good fight. Go and debate him.
That's my 2 cents.
All right, next question. Ron Hunter, he asked, understanding I'm definitely not a sailor, can you also let down a small part of the main, like a half reef? This way that when you're on the line to whether to reef or not, you can just pull a little bit out. Or is that only with power furlers? Adam's been talking way too much.
Yeah.
I'm going to fill this one
You can get this one.
I think when people have a roller furler, of course they have the ability to just bring a little more...
I'm joking.
They have the ability to bring a little bit in and a little bit out, so I think they do have the ability to do that and turn around.
Sorry, I'm wildly distracted. You're doing great. Hang on.
So you have a in-boom furling or in-mast furling. And in-mast furlings, you can't have a batten. Sorry, you can have a vertical batten, and I assume that you can only... There are specific points of where it's best to reef to in a vertical batten. And the same could be said for a horizontal batten if it's in-boom furling as well. But as Adam did point out to me earlier when we did go over this question, and I learnt a little bit from him, they do have ideal points of where to reef.
There are, whilst yes, in theory you have infinite points of reef in or out because you're just furling it up, much like your head sail, you have certain points that are sort of reinforced and are sort of ideal points of reefing where the chafe is to a minimum and you're not risking loading up your battens partially, whether they be vertical or horizontal. We have not got infinite points of reef. We have what's called slab reefing, where you sort of lower the halyard tension, put a little ring on the mainsail down onto a hook at the gooseneck of the boom,
And you pull
and then
everything
you
down.
rehoist the halyard, which then tightens up that side of the sail, and then you use the sort of a reefing line, which is essentially an outhaul that pulls it down and back at a reefing point parallel to the one on the boom, and then you can flatten out all the points of sail at the new reefing point. So we only have 3 points of reef. I guess you could theoretically, if you've got room for all of the lines, you could put as many reefing crinkles in the main as you like, but there's a certain point where it's just not worth all the extra running, rigging and whatnot. I did talk about that in another video too. Can you explain reefing?
Okay.
Yeah, so that I did a better job of explaining reefing.
See the link here.
See the link here, that's right.
Ultimately though, the best rule of practice is if you're umming and ahhing about reefing, just take the reef.
Take the damn reef.
Exactly. Tom Bure says, are there any visual tells for when to reef, or do you just follow the force of the wind? So I think when we first bought our boat, we asked the same question, and luckily it's all handy dandy there in your little manual, that our first reef we should take around about 18 to 20 knots, our second reef we should take around about 23 to 24 knots I think. But either way, once you get out there, you kind of feel the wind and you see how things go.
Most boats have a sweet spot and they're sort of designed to be handled a certain way and have a certain angle of heel beyond which they become woefully inefficient and they don't balance out correctly. And so you're endeavouring to just keep the boat in its happy place. When that point, where and when that point occurs is down to your appetite, I suppose. But essentially when you're heeling over like crazy, your drag line and your thrust line are offset, so you're going to have a lot of extra weather helm or lee helm depending on what's driving you over. The forces become very obviously out of balance, and you'll notice if you're driving on your autopilot that your wheel you'll be like driving at full lock against things, and that's when you need to start thinking about your balance, thinking about reefing down the sails to flatten the boat out, rebalance it, and generally just cool your jets. Things are getting a bit out of hand. That's what I mostly govern. Are we carrying enough sail, or are we carrying too much sail rather, is firstly, am I holding on for dear life? Secondly, is the wheel not balanced? And lastly, is Kiara green around the gills?
Usually. No. Okay, last question. Greg Vanderboom asked, what about your new sails? Where are they?
On the boat! They're on the stays!
Yeah, they're up there, right now!
They're all the same colour. Finally!
We're a completely navy blue canvas boat.
She's looking like a real... Yeah, she's
Yeah.
ready to go do something.
Another 2 more episodes and you're going to see our new sails. So we're not far behind real time. We've just gone for a sail with them. We can say right now though they look fantastic.
They
and we're so
sound
excited.
crisp and they are beautiful.
So those are all the questions that we have time for, and I think we've been prattling on now for quite a while. So thank you for listening while we've been talking.
Questions.
Yes, and as always as well, this is a very open discussion. What we've learned, we're sharing, but it might not always, you guys might have had different experiences than us.
And we are learning too. We're learning from you as much as we are trying to share what we've learned with you.
Yes.
So, when we talk about boats and how they behave, and we're talking about this boat and what we've learned from other people on their boats. If you've got different experiences, come forth and share.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
Don't profess to be experts, just sharing our knowledge, and if you comment below, that's you sharing your knowledge too. Yeah?
yeah.
Alright, thank you so much guys, and we will see you next week.
See you next time.